Thank you so much, Wayne, for that very, very kind introduction. And you are right, my daughter does have me wrapped around her little finger. There's no question about that. But it's really an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to come back to Salt Lake City. I've been here once or twice in the past. I have friends here, some of whom are on the University of Utah faculty, whom I met with today. So, you know, it's not a hard slog for me. And, you know, it's only one time zone, so, you know, there's a definite advantage. Anyway, I very much appreciate all of you being here tonight. I want to try to explain to you what has happened. These last 40 years, something has gone very wrong. And the question is, what? People say, you know, the food's there. You know, it was there before. We didn't have this problem. People say the TV's there, the video games are there, the, you know, iPads are there. Well, they weren't there before. But the fact is, we have a crisis that is not explained by our diet and our exercise. Something else is going on, and I'm going to try to explain to you how this has occurred, what the biochemistry is in palatable doses so that it's, you know, doesn't overwhelm you, and try to string it together in a way that will make evolutionary sense, and then explain how our biochemistry has been hijacked for personal profit. Okay? That's where we're going. That's my charge, and hopefully by the end of tonight you'll see why. So first of all, I have no disclosures. No food industry concern is putting me up to this, I promise you. So here's the past. Just 13 years ago, 6 million kids are seriously overweight. Well, with all of the media attention, with all of the clinical programs that are available, with all of the health clubs, with all of the bottled water, and with Michelle Obama's vegetable gardens, we are now up to 20 million. Here's the present. Currently, there are 30% more obese people walking the planet than there are undernourished people. Now, 20 years ago, this was exactly opposite. And these overnourished people are living in the same homes and in the same villages as the undernourished people. This does not look like a behavior. This looks like an exposure. This is what cholera looks like. This is what influenza looks like. This is what tuberculosis looks like. Well, this isn't an infectious disease. How do you explain this concept of exposure? 371 million diabetics. That's 6% of the world's population, and they are chewing through all the healthcare resources. There's nothing left for anyone else. And this is true not just here, but in the developing world also. So much so that Ban Ki-moon, U.S. Secretary General, 3 years ago, declared that non-communicable disease was now a bigger problem for the developing world, not just the developed world, than was acute infectious disease, including HIV. That's a big statement with major ramifications and changes in allocation of resources. By the way, those resources are now going to Ebola. Okay, but nonetheless, at some point, we're going to have to deal with this problem. Now, if you look, and I know it's hard to read, and you don't have to read it, but this is from the New England Journal, looking at the change in U.S. deaths from heart disease. Smoking down, systolic blood pressure down, total cholesterol down, physical activity up. These should all be things that help and improve things, yet our mean lifespans going down, not up. There's actually been a downtick in mean life expectancy in the United States over the last 2 years. And the reason is because BMI is going up, diabetes is going up to offset the problem. And worse yet, they're getting sicker sooner, and they're not dying. Anybody read the Atlantic article by Zeke Emanuel, Why I Want to Die at 75? Anybody see that? What'd you think of that? You thought that was okay? Really? I got a bridge to sell you. Okay. This is a disaster. He makes a good point. He says, we haven't increased the time of living, we have increased the time of dying. Indeed, that is correct. And more money goes into dying than into living. And that's what's breaking the medical bank. That is all true. The question is, does it have to be this way? Is there something we could do about it? How about this? Does everybody love Dilbert? Health problems and absenteeism are a huge cost to this business. So give me a raise or I'll eat unhealthy food and avoid all forms of exercise. You already do these things. How could you possibly know that? So this is what we call presenteeism. Everybody knows what absenteeism. This is presenteeism. Presenteeism is a real disaster because people are occupying bodies and slots at companies, not doing their job. Productivity is going down, and companies are losing now on the positive side of the ledger, not just the negative side of the ledger. They've been worried about healthcare costs for many years, but now they're actually having decreases in productivity. So business is getting on board. In fact, insurance costs each and every one of your employers $2,751 extra per employee for obesity-related disease, whether the employee is obese or not. And this is affecting productivity. This means you can't hire as many people. This is affecting unemployment. This is affecting everybody, not just the obese and not just the diabetic. And here's what the future will look like if we do nothing. Experts predict 165 million Americans will be obese by the year 2030. 100 million Americans will have diabetes by 2050, but it really won't matter because Medicare will be broke by the year 2026. So basically, like the soup Nazi said, no health care for you. Well, to be honest with you, I'm going to be 69 in the year 2026, and I want my friggin' Medicare. And I worked hard enough for it, and you worked hard enough for it, and it won't be there if we do nothing. We got 13 years to turn this around, and it ain't turning around. And the final stake in the heart, Obamacare. Now, I don't know if you like Obamacare or don't like Obamacare. I don't even care. The question is, how are we going to pay for this? Putting 32 million sick people onto the rolls. How are we going to do that? The president says we're going to pay for this by providing preventative services. So instead of going to the emergency room, you go to the doctor. And that'll cost a whole lot less. Keep people out of the emergency room. Sounds great, except for one little problem. There is no medicalized prevention for any of these chronic metabolic diseases. You're going to get it anyway. There's just long-term treatment, and Big Pharma loves it. They love it so much, they have actually diverted all of their resources away from acute infectious diseases, like Ebola, and instead have focused all of their efforts on chronic diseases like diabetes, because you're going to have that for 20 or 30 or 40 years. And all that time being less or non-productive. This is a disaster. This is a sinkhole. And we can't climb out of it. Or can we? In the meantime, deaths from diabetes complications have declined, but diabetes rates have gone up in all age groups to make up for it. The costs keep going up. Diabetes costs the U.S. $245 billion alone, never mind all the other chronic metabolic diseases, which account for 75% of the $2.7 trillion healthcare budget. Type 2 diabetes in children has gone up 30% in the last 5 years. And again, 1/3 of all Americans will have diabetes by the year 2050. That's where we're going. The question is, why is this happening? And why is this not just happening in America? Why is this happening all over the world? So, let's talk evolution. This is a statue, and it is 22,000 years old. It was unearthed in Vienna in 1908, sits in the Museum of Natural History there, and it's called the Venus von Willendorf. And what it shows us is that the ancients knew about obesity before they knew about McDonald's. Okay? Obesity is part of the human condition. Obesity actually is, in some ways, adaptive. But something went wrong. How'd the world get so obese and so fast in this short period of time? So that brings us to this guy here, Darwin. Okay? What would he say about this? So, yes, obesity continues to worsen, prevalence and severity, increasing in all developed and developing countries, increasing in all age groups, and especially in children, and recidivism is high. Virtually nobody can lose weight and keep it off. We all know that. The question is, what's the explanation? So the obvious explanation is, well, we're all just a bunch of gluttons and sloths, right? You eat too much, you exercise too little, just go to your doctor, he'll tell you. What would Darwin say about this? He would say that we've got a mismatch between our biochemistry, or our genetics, and our environment. He would say that somehow our environment has changed in such a way as to foment this current epidemic. And the question is, what about the environment did it so that we can fix it and turn it back? So first you have to know, like, why is there obesity in the first place? Well, obvious. It's the rainy day issue, okay? Energy storage for a rainy day. We had millions of years of famine. We had all those years of foraging. Now we don't forage, right? Except in our, freezers, But the point is, we actually want to store energy. It's part of our biological makeup. So how is this selective advantage achieved? Well, it's achieved through two phenomena that we have to describe, two biochemical phenomena, and this is where the science comes in. Something called leptin resistance and something called insulin resistance, and I'm going to describe both of them to you. So this is a complicated slide, but it basically shows how the negative feedback pathway of energy balance works. So let me try to describe it to you. Over here in blue, we have 4 hormones. Okay? We're not going to talk about 2 of them. I'm just going to mention them in passing. Over here, this one called ghrelin. Ghrelin comes from the stomach. Ghrelin is your hunger hormone. When your stomach is empty, ghrelin is up, goes up, tells your brain, I'm hungry, feed me. You put food in the stomach, ghrelin goes down. So this is an alimentary, meal-to-meal hormone that regulates hunger or not. Then there's this other hormone over here called peptide YY, which comes from the end of the small intestine. And this is the satiety hormone. This is the hormone that says, I've had enough. I don't need to eat another bite. I am satiated. This is the satiety hormone. Ghrelin in the stomach, peptide YY in the end of the small intestine. There's 22 feet of intestine between the two signals. Takes time. So you eat the plate of food, you're still hungry. Reason? The ghrelin went down, but you didn't get the satiety signal yet. You're supposed to wait 20 minutes. But of course, kids say, I'm still hungry. Parents give them a whole nother plate of food, and therefore you've gained extra calories, extra weight. So let your kid leave the table. Let them go do their homework. Let them go outside. If they come back 20 minutes later, then they can have a second portion and not before. This is one of the things we teach in our clinic. And it's because of these 2 hormones. That's all I'm going to mention about these 2. Then there are these other 2 hormones over here, leptin and insulin, and that's where the action is. Now notice, leptin comes from your fat cell and goes to your brain, here, your hypothalamus. This is ground zero for energy balance regulation. And what it tells your brain is, I've got enough energy on board. My fat cells are big enough so that I can engage in expensive metabolic processes such as puberty and pregnancy. I can burn energy at a normal rate and feel good about it because I'm not in deficit. Okay? So leptin is a hormone that tells your brain your adiposity status. And when your leptin is low, your brain senses that as starvation. Everybody with me so far? Then you've got this other hormone over here called insulin. Now, insulin is really interesting. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about insulin. Notice, insulin goes 2 ways. It goes to the fat cell and tells the fat cell, whatever you're not burning, put it in your fat cell for storage. It is the energy storage hormone. It makes fat. But it also goes to the brain, same place as all the other hormones. And what it tells the brain there is, hey, I'm in the middle of metabolizing a meal. Let me deal with what I've got now. And so it's also part of the satiety signal. So it does two jobs at once. And notice that those two jobs are in opposite directions. So it's telling the fat cell store, and it's telling the brain stop. And it is this dichotomy that will get us into trouble, and you will see why. Okay. So to explain how the system works, I want to offer you a paradox. Okay, here's the paradox. What happens when you give a 5-year-old kid a cookie? Come on, some of you have children. It bounces off walls. Okay, known as the sugar high. Okay? Every parent knows it, and every kindergarten teacher knows it. That's why the cupcakes come out at the end of the day instead of in the middle, because once the cupcakes come out, that's it. Lesson's over. Every teacher knows this. Why does this happen? So you eat the cookie, the insulin deposits the energy in the fat cell. The fat cell makes leptin. The leptin goes to the hypothalamus, this area that controls energy balance. And what it does is it tells a part of your nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight part of your nervous system, that there's energy on board, there's extra, go ahead and burn it off. And so it activates the sympathetic nervous system, tells your fat cell, give up some energy so that you can stay in negative yin-yang energy balance. So what you have here is a nice negative feedback pathway between the fat cell of the brain and your sympathetic nervous system to keep you in energy balance. This is when everything's working right. But here's the paradox. What happens if you give an obese 5-year-old kid a cookie? They're in the pantry looking for more cookies. Anybody ever see a sugar high in an obese kid? Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. And the reason is because they can't see their leptin. Because if they could see their leptin, they'd have a sugar high, and that's exactly why they're obese, is because they can't see their leptin. Because obesity is leptin resistance. There's something blocking the leptin signal. So let's talk about that. So here are two patients of mine. HIPAA tells me I can't tell you their names, but this guy over here, okay, that's an OB mouse, okay? This animal is deficient in the hormone leptin. It has a mutation in the leptin gene. So this animal's leptin level is 0. So this animal's brain is constantly seeing starvation. No matter how much weight this animal gains, this animal's brain can't tell. Everybody got the picture? Not only does this animal eat everything in sight, but this animal is the world's greatest couch potato, okay? And rats or mice make nests in the cage. Anybody who ever worked in labs, they make little nests in the side of the cage and build up the sawdust and everything. These animals are such couch potatoes that if you plop them in the cage, they stay where you put them. They never move. Okay, they're like tribbles. They just like that, okay? The only reason this animal ever gets off his hiney is if you put the food on the other side of the cage and they waddle over there, eat all the food, and then stay there instead. Okay? Everybody got it? Terrible, okay? That's his littermate over there. So here's how leptin works. So here's your hypothalamus. Again, that's ground zero. And leptin is telling your hypothalamus that you've got energy on board when you can see it. And so if your brain can see it, then you're over in this diamond over here called anorexogenesis. I'm not hungry because I don't need to be, and I can burn energy at a normal rate and feel good about it because I have enough excess that I'm not worried that I'm going to get into trouble. Everybody got that? Okay? And so it activates the sympathetic nervous system to go ahead to the fat cell and burn off some. And it also tells the vagus nerve, which is your energy intake nerve, your energy storage nerve, your appetite nerve, hey, calm down. Wait till later. I don't need to eat right now. So you have an activation of your sympathetic nervous system to burn it, and you have an inactivation of your vagus nerve to stop if you're in this diamond over here. But what if you can't see your leptin? What if your leptin's low, like this animal, like this leptin-deficient mouse? Then you're over here in this diamond instead. Orexigenesis. Hey, I'm hungry. I need to eat, and I need to eat now. And worse yet, because my brain is starving, I'm going to shut down my energy expenditure. I'm going to stop exercising. I am going to sit on the couch and play a video game is what I'm going to do. And so your sympathetic nervous system goes down in order to conserve, and your vagal tone goes up in order to, number one, get hungry, increase appetite, and number two, a branch of the vagus nerve goes to the pancreas and tells the pancreas to release extra insulin, remember, which is your energy storage hormone. So your vagus nerve and your pancreas are linked together in order to get you to store more energy in your fat cell. And then your leptin would go up, and then you're back into negative energy and negative feedback energy balance again. Everybody got that? So far, so good? Okay. And we have leptin-deficient people. 14 of them. 14 leptin-deficient children. Now, here's an example of one. Normal weight at birth, and by 6 months of age, patient's already obese, already overeating, because this kid can't see his leptin because it ain't there. Leptin deficiency. And the kid keeps gaining weight, until he is 10 years old and weighs 220 pounds. And then this kid starts getting daily injections of leptin, recombinant leptin, made in a bottle, made in a laboratory. And look what happens. Kid loses weight on a dime because you have replaced the hormone that is missing. This is what I do as an endocrinologist, hormone replacement therapy. It's my job. Whatever's missing, you give it back. So we're giving it back, and look what happens. The kid loses weight, and it's all fat mass. It's not even lean mass. We have reversed the metabolic dysfunction because we have given the hormone that's missing. Everybody got it? Really cool. For 14 people. Okay? And they're all of Pakistani or Turkish extraction, and they live in London or Istanbul. Great for them. What about the rest of us? The rest of us, unfortunately, are not leptin deficient, or we'd have a drug that worked. We are instead leptin resistant. We have boatloads of leptin. We make leptin to beat the band, and however much fat you have, that's how much leptin you have. But it ain't working, because if it were working, you wouldn't be obese. Something is blocking that leptin from working. This X right here, this question mark, that's the holy grail. Something is blocking the leptin from reaching the hypothalamus and telling the hypothalamus what's going on. That leptin block, leptin resistance. Because if we could solve that, if we knew what that was, we could fix obesity. It's that simple. Just find the block. It's been harder than you think to find. Okay? And a lot of drug companies have been spending a lot of money, and they ain't found it yet. Okay, that's leptin. Now remember insulin. Insulin's cool, right? Because it does two things at once. It tells the fat cells store, and it tells the brain stop. Remember? Two different directions. So let's talk about insulin. This is the patient that got me started in obesity research now 19 years ago. This is a 15-year-old boy in this picture, and he weighs 364 pounds. At age 7, this kid was perfectly normal weight for height, perfectly normal kid, and then he developed this brain tumor, okay, sitting in the middle of his energy balance pathway, knocking out his hypothalamus. This is a hypothalamic chiasmatic astrocytoma. And it is a Goomba sitting in the middle of his energy balance pathway. And he required surgery, and he required radiation, and he lost all his pituitary hormones, which we replaced. And he started gaining weight at the rate of 30 pounds per year, nonstop, ad nauseum, ad infinitum, to his current weight of 364 pounds. So this form of intractable obesity due to brain damage, which this kid has, we call hypothalamic obesity. And this is how I got started in obesity research when I was at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And I see one of my colleagues who I worked with many years ago from St. Jude's sitting in the second row. Okay. So, why does this happen? Two different hypotheses. The first one, you damage the hypothalamus, you damage the satiety center. So you basically overeat because you're always insatiable. You eat too much, and therefore you become obese. And if you become obese, then your body has to make extra insulin in order to tend all of that fat. In which case, the insulin is due to the obesity. Everybody got that? The problem is, when you actually analyze these kids, they're not eating more. They're actually eating reasonable amounts for their size. They're not eating more. But boy, oh boy, are they exercising less. They do not move. These kids lose interest in everything. And the parents would come to me when I was at St. Jude, and they would say, this is double jeopardy. This is unfair. My child almost died of this brain tumor. We saved his life, and now he's going to die of a complication of the therapy. This is unfair. Do something about it. I said, okay. So we researched the literature about what might be happening, and it turned out that there's this other hypothesis that might be going on instead. That damage to the hypothalamus drives this vagus nerve to tell the pancreas to release extra insulin. And that extra insulin is what's driving the energy into fat instead. Now, if this is the case, the obesity causes the insulin. Nothing I can do about that because I can't fix a brain. But if this were the case, where the insulin causes the obesity, I have a way maybe of fixing that. Because there's a drug I can use to try to block insulin release from the pancreas. This is a drug, as an endocrinologist, I know how to use, called octreotide. It has other uses as well, but I used it to reduce this patient's insulin. Everybody with me? So the question is, would this drug turn this problem around? Okay? So here's patient number one. First patient treated. It was a pilot trial initially. And here she is, pineal tumor, 220 pounds. And here she is 1 year later on the drug at 172 pounds, having lost 48 pounds. And there's an apocryphal story that goes with this patient. Because the patient is patient number one. She was on the drug at low dose for a week, 1 week, hadn't lost any weight yet. And the mother called me up frantic and said, Dr. Lustig, something's going on here. I went, oh my God, we've got an adverse event. I'm going to have to stop the study. And, oh my God, what happened to the patient? What happened? She says, well, normally we would go to Taco Bell and she would eat 5 tacos and an enchilada and she'd still be hungry. Well, we just went to Taco Bell and she ate 2 tacos and she was full. And she just vacuumed the house. I go, really? What does she charge? Just kidding. Well, the fact of the matter is this happened to many patients. 1 patient started competitive swimming. 2 patients started lifting weights at home. 1 kid became the manager of his high school basketball team, running around collecting all the basketballs. These were kids who sat on the couch, ate Doritos, and slept. And all of a sudden, now they're active. Here's the competitive swimmer right here. So here she is, 4 BMI points later, 6 months later, having lost quite a bit of weight, and she started competitive swimming. But the study was over, the drug is expensive, no one was paying for it, insurance company wouldn't cover it, and here she is 2¼ years later, desperately trying to do something about her weight, and her BMI has gone up 11 points. We finally prevailed upon the insurance company. They finally gave her the drug back, and her BMI went back down to 27. Everybody got it? And here's the proband patient I showed you at the beginning, 364 pounds. Here he is at 326, first time he took a picture with his shirt off. And here is the pièce de résistance. This is the unbelievable, you can't touch this. So this is a beautiful young lady from Hawaii. She's not even my patient. Lily in the hair, age 13 here. 1 month after this picture was taken, she was in a terrible car accident on H1 in Honolulu. And she was in the Kaiser intensive care unit for a month, comatose. And she woke up and she started gaining weight at the rate of 30 pounds per year as well. And here she is 2.5 years later. So I was giving grand rounds at Kaiser Honolulu, and they invited the patient and her mother to come to the talk because they were thinking about putting her on octreotide. And there we are together at the time. And they went ahead and did it. And here she is 1.5 years later at her high school graduation. Now, who here wants to tell me that this is gluttony and sloth? Who here wants to tell me this is this kid's fault? This is biochemistry. The biochemistry drove the behavior. The insulin drove the behavior. The insulin made her eat too much and exercise too little. And when we got the insulin down, exactly the opposite. We fixed her hormones, hormone replacement therapy, and she's better. Everybody got it? Cool. So here's how you think about it. And actually, you should think about this for all patients. Each of us is really 2 compartments. There's you, your heart, your liver, your kidney, your lungs, your muscles, your lean body mass, which burns energy, and then there's your fat, which stores it. Now, the substrate for both compartments is glucose. But glucose is never at substrate saturation for both compartments at the same time. Nobody can eat that much. Which means that there's a competition going on between the 2 compartments. Which compartment gets the glucose? What determines that? Well, your insulin does. Because when your insulin's up, it goes to your fat, because that's insulin's job, is to steal it away and put it in fat for storage. Everybody got it? Now, normally, your fat would make leptin, and your leptin would tell your brain, hey, I don't need to eat so much, I can calm down and burn it off. And so your food would go down, your glucose would go down, so your insulin would go down, and so more would go to you. And so you'd stay in that nice negative yin-yang energy balance that I showed you before. Everybody with me so far? But these kids, they got a brain tumor. They got a CNS insult. Okay? So their vagus nerve is in overdrive because they can't see their leptin. And their vagus nerve is telling their pancreas, release all this insulin in order to make more fat, to make more leptin, which they'll never see. And they can't get better unless we get the insulin down. If we get the insulin down, then less glucose goes to their fat, more goes to them. They feel better. They don't need to eat so much, and they lose weight. And they turn the process around. So you'd say, well, that's a really cool parlor trick. But what the hell does this have to do with garden variety obesity that's out there on the street? They don't have brain tumors. Well, we did this to a bunch of obese adults without brain tumors. And this is an example of a patient, Christmas 1998, holding up some food, and here she is 35 pounds later in her jogging togs because she showed me she wanted to exercise because she felt better. And whenever we drop people's insulin, they feel better. They get more energy expenditure. And how much energy you burn and how good you feel are synonymous. Energy expenditure equals quality of life. Things that make your energy expenditure go up make you feel good, like ephedrine off the market. Caffeine for 2 hours, like me. Exercise. Things that make your energy expenditure go down make you feel lousy, like hypothyroidism, starvation. So how much energy you burn has everything to do with how good you feel. And if you're stealing energy away from your body and putting it in your fat, you're going to gain weight, you're going to be hungry, and you're going to feel lousy. And the insulin did it. The biochemistry drove the behavior. So, the cause of leptin resistance is insulin. Insulin blocks leptin signaling. Insulin is the problem. Insulin is an endogenous, that is, you make it yourself, leptin antagonist. It blocks leptin signaling. Now, why? What would Darwin say? What would he say about this? Would he say that this made any sense at all? Actually, it makes perfect sense. And the reason is because there are 2 times in your life you actually have to gain the weight. And that's puberty and pregnancy. You don't gain weight during puberty? no reproductive competency, you don't gain weight during pregnancy, baby is aborted, survival of the species. If your leptin worked right all the time, you could never gain the weight. You'd be the 97-pound weakling on the beach, trying to bulk up and never could. There are 2 times in your life you actually have to gain the weight. And they're both insulin-resistant states because you have to raise your insulin in order to drive the energy into fat cells to be able to keep the process going. Makes sense. And doesn't it make sense that the same hormone that causes the energy storage in the periphery is the same hormone that blocks the leptin signaling to allow you to gain the weight in the first place in the brain? They're yoked together. So insulin blocks leptin. Insulin is an endogenous leptin antagonist. This is very important to understand. It's about the insulin, okay? So what's happened to our insulin? So here are glucose tolerance tests amassed from 1970 to 2014. Notice, not much difference in terms of the glucose, but look at the insulin. 1970, 1986, 1999, 2014. Look at that insulin. 3 to 4 times higher for the same glucose control. We're all hyperinsulinemic now. What changed? And if you're glucose intolerant, it's even worse. We're putting out insulin to beat the band. In fact, we're putting out so much insulin that we are out, and we've gotten so fat that we've actually outgrown our insulin supply. And when that happens, you can't shunt sugar to fat anymore, and now you've got type 2 diabetes. That's what's happened. Our insulin is now 3 to 4 times higher, and the question is, why? In 40 to 50 years, our need for insulin has increased 2 to 4-fold. How did we become 2 to 4-fold more insulin resistant in such a short period of time? And that brings us to the question of diet. So, I'm not going to tell you why this has happened. I'm going to let Will Smith tell you why this has happened. Okay?
What? I guess I owe you some answers, Hoss.
Oh, what, you feeling chatty all of a sudden?
Sorry, I can't talk right now. I got some secret cases of my own I'm working on.
I hate to tear you away from your video game.
All right, I'm hanging up.
You know the most destructive force in the universe?
Sugar?
You know, if Hollywood knows this, why don't you? All right. What I'm going to be describing to you is in these 2 publications. They're for the lay public to some extent. First one from the New York Times Magazine called Is Sugar Toxic? About our work at UCSF, our research. And this was a Nature comment that we wrote about 2 years ago called The Toxic Truth About Sugar that I wrote with my colleagues Laura Schmidt and Claire Brindis from the Institute for Health Policy Studies at UCSF. Okay? So, what are we talking about? We're talking about the sweet stuff. Okay? In America, it's this stuff up here. It's called high fructose corn syrup. You've heard of it. Most demonized additive known to man. Everybody's talking about it. So much so they actually had to make commercials supporting it, right? Everybody remember those? Okay. What is it? 1 glucose, 1 fructose. 6-membered ring, 5-membered ring. They are not the same. They are not the same. Now, the rest of the world doesn't have high fructose corn syrup. They have this stuff over here called sucrose. Table sugar, cane sugar, beet sugar, the stuff you put in your coffee, the white stuff, the crystals, okay? 1 glucose, 1 fructose, O-glycosidic linkage linking the 2 together. The enzyme in your intestine, sucrase, cleaves this in about a nanosecond. You absorb the 2 molecules. Basically, same thing. Same thing. Everybody blames high fructose corn syrup for this problem because high fructose corn syrup started at the same time as the obesity epidemic started in the 1970s. But it's high fructose corn syrup's no different. High fructose corn syrup is not worse than sugar. High fructose corn syrup is cheaper than sugar. And because it's cheaper, it found its way into everything. And because we went low fat, this was the substitute. That's what changed. So it's about the money. Now, here's what's happened to our fructose consumption. Our ancestors getting fruits and vegetables out of the ground 100 years ago consumed about 15 grams of sugar a day, and that's including honey. Now, prior to World War II, we got to about 20 grams per day. 1977, with just before high fructose corn syrup hit our shores, we were up to about 37 grams a day. That was about 8% of our total caloric intake. Now, double that for sugar, remember, because it's doubled, because glucose and fructose weigh the same. Okay? 1994, 55 grams of sugar a day, fructose a day. That's 10% of our total caloric intake. And adolescents currently consume 75 grams of fructose per day. That's 12% of total caloric intake. And 25% consume more than 100 grams. And actually, there was an abstract at the Obesity Society just 2 days ago where they said that all of these numbers are wrong. They're actually 60% higher. Now, that's one abstract. Don't know, but big press release about it. And it's in everything. Because of the 600,000 items in the American grocery store, 80% now have added sugar in some fashion. Because the food industry knows when they add it, you buy more. It's the hook, and you'll see why. Here's what's going on worldwide. So, the American Heart Association says we're supposed to consume 150 to 200 calories in added sugar per day maximum. You can do less, but that's the maximum. So that's this color blue here. You can see how many countries around the world are over that. Okay? Pretty much everybody. And that's why we have an every country problem. So here's world sugar consumption tripling over the past 50 years. Here's per capita consumption over here. Notice Brazil. Brazil used to be so poor. They were so poor. They were always a sugar exporter because of the Amazon. But they couldn't even afford their own sugar. Now, they're a brick country, right? They got Embraer jets and biodiesel and World Cups and Olympics. Now they can, and now they have the highest rate of increase of type 2 diabetes in the world. Now, not the highest prevalence, but the highest rate of increase in prevalence. Who has the highest prevalence? Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Qatar, and Malaysia. Why them? No alcohol. I'm in Salt Lake City. What am I saying? No alcohol. But they got soft drinks like they're going out of style because it's hot and the water supply is a question mark and no alcohol. This is their reward. And they reward themselves several times a day. But barring the fact that I'm in Salt Lake City, I would rather have alcohol. Because you can only drink yourself under the table once a day. The point is that fructose is not glucose. Okay? Glucose is a 6-membered ring. Fructose is a 5-membered ring. They are not the same. In fact, fructose is 7 times more likely to bind to proteins and cause protein and lipid damage because of it, called the Maillard reaction, called advanced glycation end products. Anybody here with diabetes? Anybody? Only a couple. What does the doctor measure? Measures something called the hemoglobin A1C. You've heard of that? That's glucose binding to proteins. Well, fructose binds to proteins 7 times faster. Okay? Fructose does not suppress that hunger hormone, ghrelin. So if you pre-treat a kid with a can of soda and then let them loose at the fast food restaurant, do they eat less or do they eat more? They eat more. They just took on 150 calories in a can of soda, but they eat more because they didn't get the hunger suppression signal of ghrelin. Okay? Fructose does not stimulate insulin. Remember, insulin's part of the satiety signal when your brain can see it. Remember? Okay? And it doesn't stimulate leptin either, so your brain doesn't know you ate. And finally, liver fructose metabolism is completely different from that of glucose. And that matters because what happens in the liver has everything to do with whether you get sick or not. It's about the liver. And here's why. So here's a liver cell right here, and we're going to consume here 120 calories in glucose, half a cup of rice, as an example. Turns out 80% of that 120 will go to all the organs in the body, because every organ in the body can metabolize glucose. Glucose is the energy of life. Every cell on the planet can metabolize glucose. Glucose is so important that if you don't consume it, your body will make it, your liver will make it. It's called gluconeogenesis. Right? So your body never runs out of glucose. But only 20% enters the liver on any given meal. Everybody with me? So your liver's not getting overwhelmed. So what happens to that glucose? Well, most of it goes right here, to glycogen, called liver starch. And liver starch, for lack of a better word, is good. Liver starch is what your body wants to do with excess energy. This is why marathoners carb load, pasta load before a marathon race, is to build up the glycogen to give them some extra added stored energy. And no amount of glycogen can hurt the liver. We have kids with disorders of glycogen storage. Their livers are down to their knees. Their blood sugar is down to 10. They're in terrible shape, but they do not get liver failure because glycogen doesn't harm the liver. Glycogen, for lack of a better word, is good. Let's talk about another carbohydrate. Alcohol. It's not really a carbohydrate, but it's close enough. Okay? Here's its formula. But ethanol, as you know, is not just a carbohydrate, it's a toxin. And it's a toxin unrelated to its calories. Alcohol is not dangerous because of its calories. Alcohol is dangerous because it's alcohol, right? Car accidents, acute toxicity, and fry your liver, chronic toxicity. Here are the acute effects. Everybody went to college, right? There they are, okay? Well, maybe not. Salt Lake City. But fructose does none of these things because fructose is not metabolized in the brain. Now, let's see what happens when you consume alcohol. Same number of calories of alcohol, shot a maker's mark, okay, 120 calories. Now, 20% of them will actually be absorbed and metabolized in the gut before it ever gets to your liver. 80% will hit your liver, 96 calories. And notice, see glycogen anywhere? No glycogen. Go straight down here to the mitochondria. The mitochondria have no choice but to take any excess from its burning and turn it into liver fat. This is liver fat right over here. VLDL, that's triglyceride. Triglyceride, that's what you measure when you do a lipid profile. And triglyceride, for lack of a better word, is bad because triglyceride can serve as a substrate for heart disease or obesity. And if the triglyceride doesn't make it out of the liver, now you have a lipid droplet. Now you have what's known as alcoholic fatty liver disease. And that's what leads to cirrhosis. So you can have your choice of how you want to die. Heart disease, obesity, or cirrhosis. Toxin, we all agree. We regulate it. Now let's do fructose. So when you consume sugar, because you never consume fructose alone, because fructose alone in nature doesn't exist, you're always consuming sugar or high fructose corn syrup, you're getting the whole fructose load, because only the liver can metabolize it, plus you're getting the 20% of the glucose. So you're getting a whole bunch compared to, say, glucose, where it was only 24 calories, now you're getting 72. So you're getting 3 times the substrate that you have to deal with. And what happens to it? See glycogen anywhere? No glycogen. It doesn't exist. But you see a whole lot of arrows. Okay? And they're pointing at a whole lot of bad stuff. Okay? Like lipid problems, insulin resistance, high blood pressure, okay? All this stuff. And, of course, the lipid droplet, because you make liver fat out of that excess fructose, too. Fructose drives liver fat accumulation. That's what we've learned over the last 10 years. So what's the difference between these two items? Can of Coke, can of beer. 150 calories both. Okay? Clearly different makeups, right? Because you got 75 glucose, 75 fructose here, and you got 90 alcohol, 60 maltose, that's glucose there. Right? First pass effect takes 10% off the top for alcohol. So the number of calories hitting the liver is pretty much exactly the same. So in America, we have this thing called beer belly. Well, we also have this thing called soda belly. And that's what I have to deal with. Okay? So the adult endocrinologists deal with the beer belly, I have to deal with the soda belly. But they're basically the same, and they cause the same diseases. The same fatty liver disease, the same type 2 diabetes. So fructose induces this insulin resistance, this phenomenon, which ultimately induces leptin resistance. When your insulin goes high, your brain can't see the leptin. And the reason is because your liver got shot. And you can choose whether you want it to be from a soft drink or whether you want it to be from a shot of alcohol. Why? What's in it? Why does this make Darwinian sense? Well, think about it this way. The standard place you get fructose from is fruit. But our ancestors only were exposed to fruit about 1 month a year. It's called harvest time. And what came after harvest time? Winter. No food. So wouldn't it make sense to bulk up and put some extra fat in your fat cells, getting ready for this cycle of no food until spring came around, called seasonal insulin resistance? Now, if leptin worked all the time, you couldn't store that energy. You wouldn't be interested in trying to overconsume. So there's a selective advantage by inducing this seasonal insulin resistance, by gorging on fruit when it's available, while it was available, because it ain't going to be available for very long. Everybody got it? But now it's available 24/7, 365, and in unlimited amounts and unopposed by fiber, which can slow the absorption, which can help your liver. So that's what orange juice is. So the question is, how do I know this is true? Well, here's why. Because orangutans do this. So this is the masting fruit orgy of Papua New Guinea, where the orangutans, basically, it's like Girls Gone Wild, okay? They eat every piece of fruit in sight. Okay, so here's the availability, comes around January, okay? And while it's going on, it's all fruit all the time. There's nothing else that they're going to eat. And during that period of time, their calories are way up because they're going to be storing this stuff. And these are ketones in the urine. Now, how you collect orangutan urine is beyond me. But they do. I swear I do not understand this. But here's the period of the masting fruit orgy. There are no ketones because insulin blocks ketone formation, because insulin pushes on the fat cell. So that's telling you their insulin levels are high when the fruit is available. So they are hyperinsulinemic, and they are storing more energy, and they are eating all the fructose they can, because when it's over, it's bad. Okay? So this is their way of cycling their weight and their energy storage to deal with their environment. Okay? Now, the next question. Why do we love it so much? So the question has come up, is sugar addictive? You know, it's just the other white powder. You know, the lay public seems to know this. You know, here are all these books, you know, that have been written about this issue. So the question is it real? So we have 5 tastes on our tongue. Everybody knows the 5 tastes? There's sweet, of course. There's salty, sour, umami, and bitter, right? Sugar covers up the other 4. So it covers up salty, like Chex Mix or honey roasted peanuts. It covers up sour, like German wines. You know, they've got all that citric acid. They're almost vinegar, but you throw some Swiss Reserve, it's called, and so it's not so bad. Or lemonade, right? You put the sugar in, you can't even tell. Umami, like sweet and sour pork at the Chinese restaurant, that's half soy sauce. You would never eat that, but, you know, you put some sugar in it, you can't even tell. And it covers up bitter, like milk chocolate, okay? So does this make Darwinian sense? And the answer is, yeah, this makes Darwinian sense too. Why? Because there are no foodstuffs in nature that are both sweet and acutely poisonous. Sweet was the signal to our ancestors that any given foodstuff was safe to eat. This was the signal that let them know. So liking sweet is ingrained into our DNA. We love it. Example. Who has children? Somebody has children. Salt Lake City. Okay. How many times do you have to give an infant a savory food before they will accept it? There are scientific studies. What's the median? 13. 13 times to give an infant a savory food. How many times do you have to give an infant a sweet food before they will accept it? Just once. Just once, okay? And they know it, okay? And once they've had it, they don't want anything else, okay? True, okay? Another example, Jamaican ackee fruit. Anybody ever been to Jamaica? Nobody? Okay. So this is a fruit. It's the national dish, ackee fruit. They even put it in tins and send it around the world. Okay. When it's immature, when it's still on the tree, it has a compound in it called hypoglycin. And it lowers your blood sugar and causes something called Jamaican vomiting sickness, and you can die from this. And of course, the Jamaicans know this. But if you wait for the flower to bloom or you wait for it to fall on the ground, the hypoglycin has been metabolized and is now safe to eat, and it is the Jamaican national dish. So sweet means safe acutely, not chronically. And our sugar craving is also Darwinian. So anybody know what this stuff is? Any neonatologists in the room? This is called sweeties. Sweeties. It is a super concentrated sucrose solution that you dip the pacifier in and put it in the newborn boy's mouth before you do the circumcision. Oh. Okay. We Jews use wine. Much better. Okay? But this releases opioids within the reward center and acts as an endogenous narcotic. So we know this. This isn't like, rocket science. Okay, so this brings us to, okay, what's all this sugar doing to us? Disease. So here are the 10 most obese states in the nation. Anybody from any of them? I used to live in Memphis, Tennessee. It's pretty bad, right, June? Yeah, okay. Here are the 10 laziest states in the nation. What's going on over there in Nevada? Right next door, guys. I guess you can only burn so much energy going like this, right? Now it's like this. Right. Okay. Here are the 10 most unhappy states in the nation. Here's the adult diabetes rate. Here's the adult heart disease rate. And here is soda per capita consumption. What do you see? You see correlation. You see correlation. Now, correlation is not causation. So this is a snapshot in time. Is it that soda causes obesity, laziness, unhappiness, diabetes, and heart disease? Or is it that obese, lazy, unhappy diabetics with heart disease drown their sorrows in a can of soda? You don't know. You can't tell. No directionality. Correlation. So the question is, do we have causation? We asked the question last year, what about the world's food supply predicts diabetes prevalence over the decade, country by country? So this is a study that we did, published last year in PLOS ONE, where we took the Food and Agriculture Organization statistics database called FAO-STAT, and it listed line item, country by country, for every year, 2000 to 2010, total calories, fruits excluding wine, fiber-containing foods, meat, cereals, oils, and sugar crops and sweeteners as line items. Everybody got it? We then took that database and regressed it against the International Diabetes Federation database for diabetes prevalence, country by country, over the decade. And then we took that and we corrected it and adjusted using the World Bank Gross National Income database to control for urbanization, poverty, aging, physical activity, and obesity, the confounders. And we asked the question, which of these things predicted diabetes? Not obesity, diabetes. Everybody got it? We had data on 204 countries, but complete data for 154. The 50 we left out were not different with a fancy test. And here's the data monitoring and quality, and I'm not going to bore you with it. This is for scientists. You don't need to worry about it unless you want to. You can tell me later. And here are the things we controlled for. Okay? GDP, obesity, urbanization, aging, and physical activity. Got it? Here's what we found. During that decade, diabetes prevalence rose 5.5 to 7%. That's a lot. And we knew that, right? Here's the effects model for sugar. If it crosses 0, it means it's not significant. As you can see, highly significant. And here's the adjusted association of sugar with diabetes prevalence. So here's what you need to know. Only changes in sugar availability predicted changes in diabetes prevalence, nothing else. Only sugar, not total calories. For every extra 150 calories any country ate per day, diabetes prevalence went up a total of 0.1%. Nothing. But if those 150 calories happened to be a can of soda instead, diabetes prevalence went up 11-fold. 11-fold by 1.1%. And we're not consuming 1 can of soda's worth of sugar per day. We're consuming 2.5. And if that abstract at the Obesity Society is correct, 3.5. So take that number of 1.1% and make it 4.5%. Okay? So those countries where sugar consumption declined actually showed decreased diabetes prevalence. And we estimate that about 25% of the world's diabetes is predicted by sugar consumption, sugar alone, having nothing to do with calories, irrespective of calories, unrelated to calories. Just like alcohol is toxic because it's alcohol, not because it's calories, sugar is toxic because it's sugar, not because it's calories. If it were calories, then every calorie would be a problem. But where those calories come from determines where they go. It's called nutritional biochemistry. The funny part is, I learned this in 1975 in college. And then I went to medical school. And they beat it out of me. And for 35 years, okay, I have selective amnesia and had totally forgotten about this. And then the data started rolling in, and I started doing my own data. And I went, oh my God. And then I remembered. Oh my God, I knew this. I knew this then. So here's the way we see it. This is sort of the hypothesis we proffered as to why this all happens. So here's the fructose coming into the liver, and here's that Browning reaction that I told you about, the hemoglobin A1C, and that causes these little hydrogen peroxides to build up called reactive oxygen species over here, called oxidative stress. In addition, the mitochondria, the energy burning factories in your cells, will also make those ROSs as they're burning the energy. That's normal. That's standard aging. And finally, in the periphery, you're going to lay down some extra fat, visceral fat, and that's going to create inflammatory cytokines, which then go to the liver and cause more reactive oxygen species. So you have this reactive oxygen species pool sitting in the liver that has to be detoxified, has to be quenched. And the thing that does that are the antioxidants. In the case of the liver, it's usually glutathione or vitamin E. And those are in the peroxisome. And that's where these ROSs go to die. And that's a good thing. And that's why certain diabetes drugs help with some of the complications, because they're upping the peroxisomes. But if you don't have enough of these, then the ROSs go here to a part of the cell called the endoplasmic reticulum, which is where proteins get folded, including the insulin molecule. And if you don't fold the insulin molecule right, what happens? You're insulin deficient. And if you don't fold the insulin receptor right, you're insulin resistant. And if you're insulin deficient and you're insulin resistant, you're a type 2 diabetic. Plus, you get the lipid droplet, you make the insulin receptor even more problematic. There you go, metabolic syndrome. And worse yet, there is no drug target for this. So when you overload your mitochondria, as I just did on that slide, it causes all of these problems. It causes cell dysfunction, causes cell aging, and causes cell death. And it causes all of this liver fat to accumulate, which causes liver insulin resistance, which drives the hyperinsulinemia, the leptin resistance, the continued eating, the sloth, and all the symptoms that we see. The only options are get the substrate down, reduce the fructose consumption. That's called diet. Now, not eat less sugar. Reduce the flux to the liver. Reduce how fast it gets there. That's called fiber. Because fiber forms a gel on the inside of the intestine that acts as a secondary barrier and prevents it from getting there so fast, giving your liver a chance to catch up. And finally, increase clearance, and that's called exercise. Diet and exercise. But not eat less, exercise more. Eat less what? Yeah. And finally, to finish it up, dollars. So here's what's happened to your diet while you've been sitting at home, chowing down on those M&Ms. Here's what's happened. 1982 to 2012. Meat, down 10% because we were all told to go low fat. Fruits and vegetables, exactly the same. No change. We're all told we don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. Well, maybe that's true, but we're eating just as much as we always did, and we didn't have this problem before, but we got it now. Grains and baked goods, 13 to 14%, up a percent. That's important because that's glucose, and that's insulin, and that's weight gain, and that contributes as well. I'm not saying it doesn't. Refined carbohydrate is a problem. Dairy products, 13.2 down to 10.6% because now we're all lactose intolerant. And finally, processed foods and sweets, 11.6 to 22.9%. This is what has changed because processed food is the problem. Because processed food is high sugar, low fiber. Real food is low sugar, high fiber. And every diet that works, and you can pick it, low carb, Atkins, Zone, Sugar Busters, Paleo, vegan, Mediterranean, traditional Japanese, down the line. Every one of those diets have two things in common: low sugar, high fiber. And do you know what a low sugar, high fiber diet is called? It's called real food. Food that came out of the ground or animals that ate food that came out of the ground. That's what real food is. Not food that comes in a package or a wrapper or a can or a bottle or a jar. That's processed food. So who's winning this war? It's a war. It's your wallet against your health, and it's the food industry against your health. So who's winning this war? Well, here is the S&P 500 over the past several years, and here is the stock price for McDonald's, Coke, and Pepsi. And here's the economic downturn of 2008 right over here. And you can see they're doing very well, thank you. And here's Hormel, Archer Daniels Midland, General Mills, ConAgra, Procter & Gamble, and Kraft, all against the S&P. Want to make money? Invest in a food company. Because they have a winning formula. Because they know how to get you to buy more. Now, societal intervention, that's the question. How are we going to fix this? Now, normally we like markets to fix problems. We like the market to do its magic. But you know what? The market has never been able to fix any substance of abuse. It wasn't able to fix tobacco. It wasn't able to fix alcohol. And that's why we have elected officials, is to work when the markets don't. And the markets have failed miserably. And this is why. Okay? So the question is, what are we going to do? So you know that if you smoke or drink or take drugs, it's bad for me. It's not just bad for you, it's bad for me, right? Secondhand smoke, car accidents, declining housing prices because you turned your house into a crack den, altered work productivity and absenteeism, right, which talked about presenteeism. So the question is, how does your obesity affect me? $274 million extra for jet fuel. Yeah, I don't know. Discomfort on the subway. Sinking of boats due to the weight. 2003, Lake George in New York, a ferry coded for 1,460-pound people, had 25 200-pound people capsized. That ain't going to do it either. Here's why. 65 billion reduction in work productivity, 50% increase in absenteeism, 50% increase in health insurance premiums, as we talked about. Even more than that wasted in healthcare resources. So here's the problem. Ready? The food industry grosses $1 trillion a year. Grosses. We spend $2.7 trillion a year on healthcare, of which 75% are chronic metabolic diseases due to this, of which 75% of them would be preventable and recoupable if we would do something. That means that we are spending $1.4 trillion a year going down a rat hole that is completely unrecoupable, that we cannot possibly get back. Every single year, $1.4 trillion. What do you think we could do with $1.4 trillion? You think we could balance the healthcare budget? You think we could balance the budget? If we solve this problem? We are losing more money than the food industry is making. That makes this unsustainable. We are losing more money than they are making. And obesity is a threat to national security. And ultimately, the government pays twice. They pay for the corn subsidy, which, by the way, is a tax on you because you have to pay extra for other foods that they're not subsidizing. And then they pay for the ER visits. And they can't afford it, and neither can we. So, last slide. Summary. Obesity means leptin resistance or brain starvation. The starvation response is what causes the recidivism, not being weak-willed. Energy expenditure and quality of life are the same thing. So how fast you burn energy determines how good you feel. And when your insulin's high, you're stealing it from your cells and putting it in your fat to feel bad. Defects in insulin signaling promote leptin resistance. Insulin's an endogenous leptin antagonist. Fructose, in particular, because of this liver fat production in the liver, induces the liver insulin resistance that we saw, which drives this metabolic syndrome and wastes our healthcare dollars. Fructose is also addictive and drives excess food consumption. Our food environment has been fructosified by the food industry specifically because they make more money. We have to get the insulin down. And the food industry has absolutely no impetus to change its practices. So it's up to our elected officials, except they don't want to touch this. So it's up to us. Guess what? Berkeley passed a soda tax. How about that? Now, I'm not for taxation per se. I am for reduction in consumption any way we can get there. But taxation is the low-hanging fruit. It's the easy thing because the market's already been distorted. Who cares if we distort it a little more? Ultimately, we have to solve this problem. It's a step in the right direction. It's a baby step, but it's a step. So for further reading, lots and lots of academic articles here, and more academic articles, and more academic articles. This will be online, and you can see it. And some non-academic stuff. This is a book that I wrote last year called Fat Chance, which has all of the science I just explained to you, plus some. Sugar has 56 names. A shopper's guide is an ebook that you can take to the store and actually figure out what's on the food label so you can buy the right thing instead of the wrong thing. And finally, the Fat Chance cookbook, which I wrote with my colleague and friend and chef, Cindy Gershon. Every recipe in this book vetted by a Mount Diablo high school student to be preparable and consumable and delicious in 30 minutes. All real food. Because if you don't know how to cook, you're hostage to the food industry for the rest of your life. It's that simple. And now 1/3 of America does not know how to cook. We have to get back to it. Time to bring back home ec. And for boys too. Okay? But don't call it home ec. Call it adult survival skills. ASS. Now they'll take it. There's a movie called Fed Up. For those of you who know about it, it's going to be playing here in next Saturday evening. Everybody saw the trailer at the beginning. There's going to be a PBS special. Hopefully, your PBS station here in Salt Lake City will pick it up during the Thanksgiving to Christmas pledge break called Sweet Revenge, Turning the Table on Processed Food, where all of this information will be available in a whole lot shorter fashion. And we have started a nonprofit very specifically to change the conversation, to change it away from personal responsibility, which it's not, to change it away from calories, which it's not, to change it away from obesity, which it's not, and to change it to the things that actually matter, our health. So called the Institute for Responsible Nutrition. There's our website, responsiblefoods.org. I hope you'll all sign up, log on, and let us tell you what we're doing, and we're doing a lot, and there's good stuff coming. And I will tell you that on Monday, watch for a big announcement from UCSF, and it will be all over the internet. Log on to that too. I can't tell you what it is. It's embargoed till then. Just know, Monday. Okay? With that, I want to thank all of you for your attention. I want to thank Wayne Potts and James Ruff for inviting me today. I want to thank the University of Utah for sponsoring this wonderful series, and I'm here to answer your questions. Thank you.